All right, you might have seen my video telling you I'm a Reds fan. While I was cleaning out the pictures, I found my Reds card. Now I don't know if it's gonna. I think it is sort of working on the camera. It's one of those when you were a kid, you could buy these things, and when you move it, it's like there's movement on the card. It's got multi layers of plastic with slits in it, and it only lets you see a certain view. So when you tilt it, you get movement. And here's they issue these in Rets. See, when you first join Rets, I told you it was like 1,800 for 18 months, something like that. Uh, they give you all this stuff that makes it like you're in college, but you're not. And it was a tech school, and it was one of the best moves I ever made. And it showed up the other day. I started talking to this one guy, and I was mentioning how at work we used to put the space shuttle launch on, and the baseball game, and if there was a World Series, they would put it on. They allowed you to have a radio. He's like, oh, we didn't have no radio. So I realized it hit me at that point that the people out here in Pennsylvania, they come out of high school, and they get some type of job in a factory, and they have no real skills, and they get on the job training, but they're always a factory worker. See, when you go to tech school, you come out with a sort of a degree. And that puts you in, like in my case, I was always in the repair section of the company, which was next door to the engineering department. And then another room would be the production. So in our area, we had different rules than the production floor. So I'm getting old. It doesn't always hit me that when I'm talking to someone about something we did, like our people would like Halloween or Christmas. Christmas they put on some type of stocking cap. Halloween they'd dress up for Halloween. We'd have dinners. We'd go out and have dinner together. And these people here never did any of that stuff. So they called bullshit on me. I had a couple of people call bullshit on me. I said, no, that's what we did. And we never did that here. I'm like, it started hitting me the other day with this one guy. I said, I really dislike living here now. Okay, it's cheap here, but I don't fit in. I try to fit in. I try to be helpful, but basically the people here are totally different. There is a different mindset. You start telling a story, and they don't believe you. Like this one guy, I was talking to him, and I said, in my neighborhood, if the police came to your house, the neighbors would come right over. They think something's really seriously, someone has died. Here, when the police come, it's always a neighborhood dispute. In my neighborhood, the way I grew up, that was very embarrassing, and you were basically considered classless if the police had to show up at your house. Growing up in the 50s and the 60s, so I'm telling this guy, and he goes, "Do you know what bullshit is?" I go, "Yeah." And he called bullshit on me that when the police would come, they would talk to you and say something like this: "We don't want to come back here. If the husband had a fight with the wife, he say to the husband, is there someone you can go stay with today?" Or to the wife, because we don't want to come back here. They didn't fill out any paperwork. Up at the office, there'd be like a memo that they talked to the two parties. That's what they used to say it. If you had a scanner, we talked to the two parties. They've resolved it on their own. And the cops would warn you, don't make us come back here a second time. And this guy was calling bullshit on me. So I went and talked to this other guy I knew, and I mentioned, I said, yeah, I said, this guy called bullshit on. He goes, no, he says, my brother had a really bad fight with my father, and the cops came and separated him and told one, separate, you got to leave the house. We can take you here or take you there, but we don't want to come back here. We're going to solve this right now. Now, the police don't do that anymore. They have it's a whole different strategy now. And people end up shooting each other and the whole thing. But I was telling this guy, they call bullshit. I started to realize the way I was raised is totally different than the people here. They can't wrap their head around the fact that where you would be working, you'd get your work done, and you put a TV set on and watch the World Series. Now, I told the one guy, he went off on me. My uncle worked for RCA. They didn't have televisions. Well, I don't really believe you. I know the RCA division I work for, the rooms were plastered in television sets. They were in tests. They were either testing tubes or transistors or whatever. You had row after row after row. Now you could flip a knob and it would go from television to a signal generator. But most of the time during the day at lunchtime, they had soap operas on, and the women from different areas would be sitting there watching the soap opera. And if you tell that story to the people here, they roll their eyes. They absolutely roll eyes. Now, in New Jersey, when you came into the front office and you had to talk to the secretary, down underneath her bench or her desk was a little television set facing up, and she would watch her soap operas. And she would turn the volume down and answer the phone. After she was done with the phone, she'd hang up the phone and put the soap opera back up. Every place I ever worked, except RCA, the women there, they didn't, my secretaries on my side didn't go over and watch the soaps on the other side. But I'm thinking, you know what the whole problem is? I went to Retz. Yeah, $1,800 separated me from warehouse people. Okay, junior engineering degree, equal to an associate's degree in electronics. Okay, and a lot of the guys I went to school with, when they died, in the obituary, they put down that they were an engineer. You know, which by today's standards you were, because you really had to learn. If you really went through Retz and took the course and really learned, you were pretty high up there. You had a wide range of subjects in electronics that you were familiar with. And then if you got into it, you could do some more reading on your own. But I thought it was funny, you know, guy going off on me the other day, and I kept thinking, what the hell's going on here? And I realize now, when I'm telling them some really, what I consider some really interesting stories, like the one engineer we had in RCA, whenever he had a problem and he would try to think it out, he would make paper airplanes and throw them out the window. This guy's name was Ken Recor. And he would throw it out. And you walk over the window, you look down on the ground. There'd be hundreds of paper airplanes down on the ground. And a police car would come up. And the police would get out and pick the paper airplanes up. And I go over and I sit down. I'm like, holy crap. See, you'd expect the cops to go to the guardhouse, say something to the guard, come upstairs and say to the guy, look, can you stop throwing the paper airplanes out the window? You're pissing off the one neighbor. Well, that's not how RCA worked. RCA was this giant company in Harrison. And most of the people in the area had relatives that worked in RCA. And the police had mothers and fathers that worked in RCA. So rather than come up and go to the guardhouse, they knew at some point Kenny would figure out what he wanted to do, and he would stop throwing the paper airplanes out the window, and they would pick the paper airplanes up and leave. Okay, this way it would satisfy the neighbor that called and complained. And I didn't understand this, and then one of the guys called me aside and he said, he does that every so often, and you got to realize you're talking RCA in Harrison, where everybody has someone they know that works here. And he says, everything gets handled differently. He says, if we get an animal that gets in the building, they call the police up, and the police come out, and they shoot the animal, like a possum or a raccoon, and it's just an ongoing thing. Hello, yeah, this is RCA, yeah, building 10's got a raccoon. Okay, we'll be right over. That's what really happened. Now, you tell that story out here, okay, they don't believe it. Now, RCA also had a company store. So if you had your work caught up, you'd say to the boss, I'm going down to the company store. I'm thinking about buying a television set. Okay, hey, Bill, you done? Yeah, okay, go with John. He wants you to help him pick out a television set. That's how it worked. And then you go down, and then your bosses would come down and join you. And you'd sit around and kibitz and bullshit for a while. And that's the way RCA was. Okay, now, probably the people in the production couldn't do that. But I wasn't in production. I was in life test, which was a separation of, it was part of engineering, okay? The engineer would come in to you, and he'd say, put up 10 chassis with this parameter, this type tube, blah, 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 this chassis. And you would do it. And then he would check back with you that they were up. You go over to the girl, you do your scheduling. She pulled the tubes down after 100 hours, 1,000 hours, 10,000, whatever it was. And you would report back to that engineer. If one of the tubes failed, he'd give you twice as many to put up again and run another test. But I realized that good old Retz for $1,800 totally put me in a different bracket than other people. And I got to watch what I say to people here, because when they saw me move here, they never saw me work. And I told them the honest truth. I sold a house for a lot of money in New Jersey. I used that money to live on until I hit Social Security. And they said to me, how can you buy a house if you don't have a job? I said, one more time. I sold a house in New Jersey. I took that money and I bought this house. And they're still paying off a house. They've got a second mortgage on the house because they had a problem. And they may never pay the house off. Okay? And I blow into town here, and like I said, I don't dress up when I'm here. I try to stay very meek because they don't have any money. And I feel bad for them, but you know, it is what it is. But good old Retz came through for me, man. Put me in a different bracket. And if I had come out of, actually when I was in high school, I was working in this sweatshop. It was electronic assembly, but it was a sweatshop. If I hadn't gone to Retz, I wouldn't have had the ability to leave that sweatshop. Or I would have got a job at like Western Electric, we had in the area, in the factory. Okay, and I would have been a factory worker till the day I retired or died. I think that's it. All right, that's it.